Hey, welcome to the Simple Nutrition Podcast, a show that helps you learn practical and actual nutrition tips from an expert. I am your host, Leonila Campos, a registered dietitian with over 8 years of experience in the nutrition field. Hey, welcome back to another episode in the Simple Nutrition Insights Podcast, where we dive into all things nutrition, fitness, and wellness. I'm your host, Leonila Campos, registered dietitian, and in today's episode, we are going to talk about something that in almost everything that we eat is found. This is sugar, specifically the truth about sugar and how it impacts our health. Is it really as bad as people say? Should we cut it out completely? We're going to answer these questions today, so stick around because you won't want to miss this one. So let's start with the basics. What is sugar? Sugar is a type of carbohydrate that comes in many forms, such as glucose, fructose, and sucrose. It is found naturally in many foods like fruits, vegetables, and dairy, but it is also added to a lot of processed foods and drinks to enhance their flavor. So you not only find it in your naturally occurring in food, right? Because it's one of those ingredients that enhances the flavor of food, and it makes it, combined with other ingredients, it makes that specific product taste a lot better. And so it can definitely affect the amount that we eat, right? So it's important to think about how much added sugar we're consuming. And so when we talk about sugar in our diet, right, and the foods that we consume, it is important to distinguish between the natural sugars, right, the natural occurring sugars, and the added sugars, because they're completely different. So your natural sugars, again, like those found in fruits, dairy, are not only going to give you sugar, right, but those foods are also going to give you fiber, vitamins, minerals, which when you compare them to just added sugar, right, nothing else, it absolutely make the food healthier, right? It's a better option for our bodies. And so the added sugars, where you're going to find them, right, surprisingly, you're not only going to find them in things that you think about, like just sugary foods like candy or sodas or cookies or cakes. You can also find it in other foods that you were not think that they're there, right? Like marinara sauce or pastas or other sauces or dressings, right? Because again, the combination of flavors makes those foods more desirable. So why do we care, right? Why do we care about the difference between these sugars, and like why does that matter? So it's specifically, right, asking ourselves this question: what happens when we consume sugar? Well, sugar provides quick energy, right, for the body, but it can also cause blood sugar spikes, especially when consumed in large amounts. So when your blood sugar spikes, right, your natural response of your body is to release insulin to bring it back down, right? So let's say you eat something that is going to turn into sugar, right? And I want to make this distinction here. Pretty much everything that we're going to eat, right, with the exception of our fats, with the exception of our proteins, right, our animal proteins, it's going to turn into so part of it, right, or some of it, or all of it is going to turn into sugar or glucose, because that is the form that our bodies needed for energy, right, for fuel. Obviously, there's differences there in terms of where the food is or where the sugar is coming from, or the glucose, right? So when it comes to eating something, right, that is going to have, let's take an example. When we eat an apple, right, yes, it's going to have fructose, which is, another form of sugar that coming from fruits. We're not only eating the fructose by itself, right? We're eating it as an apple. We're eating fiber. We're eating vitamins and minerals. And so the increase in blood sugar is not going to be as significant, right, versus eating candy, right? Because there's absolutely no fiber there, no other nutritional value. So your blood sugars are going to spike rapidly. And so then what that does is that it triggers your pancreas, right, which is your organ that produces insulin, and it's going to say, hey, send the insulin. There's a lot of sugar, or there is more sugar than there should be in the blood. We need to get it out of the blood, to take it into the cells, right? And so again, if we have that consistently, right, over time, we are overproducing insulin, we are overworking our pancreas. And so it does get to a point where our bodies are like, okay, either not going to respond to the insulin, we have insulin resistance, again, because we're having this consistent amount of sugar introduced into the blood system, right? Or that can lead to type 2 diabetes. But I want to make the distinction that diabetes itself, right, is not caused because you eat sugar. Sometimes it could be caused because of the increase in calories in general, right? That increase in food in general, because we're stimulating our pancreas, right? We're stimulating our bodies to try to break down all that food that we're consuming at once to try to take it into the cells. So it's really important to remember that, right? No, not necessarily when you eat sugar that you're going to have diabetes, but consuming consistently higher amounts of sugar, and this is more of your added sugars, right? Again, we have to remember that added sugars coming from just of your processed foods, right? Sodas, cookies, cakes, candy, packaged foods, versus our natural sugars, right? That are going to have, again, the fiber. They're going to have these other vitamins and minerals. The fiber is what helps, right, with that slow increase in blood sugars and that stability of the blood sugars instead of having like these roller coasters of blood sugars. And so we definitely want to add more foods that have fiber. So keeping those things in mind for sure, right? And so what is also important is that a lot of research shows, right, that the increase in added sugar not only impacts our bodies, not only impacts our blood sugars, our risk, right, to develop obesity, heart disease, dental problems, but also it affects our mental health. So there's research shows that a high sugar intake can increase our risk of developing mood disorders, right, such as depression and anxiety, because of that increase in refined sugars that may trigger the release of inflammatory markers in the body, which can affect our brain function. But not only that, right? There's a lot of other research that shows that higher increase in sugary foods, without adding our plant sources, without adding our fiber, it also affects our gut microbiota. And so I did an episode on that specifically. So you can go back to previous episodes and find that one specifically. But our gut microbes live in our digestive system for specific reasons, right? It's this symbiosis that we have with these microbes to keep us healthy, to keep us alive, essentially, by us providing the fuel, right? And the fuel is going to come from our fibers, which are going to come from our plant sources. So if we have a diet or our nutrition is mostly processed foods, mostly highly in sugar and refined carbohydrates, in fats, hydrogenated oils, and we're not adding any fiber, right? That alone is increasing our fiber. That alone is increasing our risk for metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, but also our gut health, right? We also see a huge impact in those microbes that we have in our digestive system, right? To help us from getting sick, to help us from getting constipated, getting gut issues. And so it's important to think about those things, right? Because when we think about, sugar is, what's the role, right? Why do we care? Because it impacts so many parts in our body, right? So many functions in our bodies. So not only our blood sugars, but also our mental health, right? The brain, it needs a high amount of blood, right? Circulating obviously through our bodies, but also to our brain. And so if we're having more of these high sugary foods, right? And not these balanced meals that are going to give us nutrients, vitamins, minerals, right? How is our brain going to react to that, right? Our brain also gets affected by those things. So, a preview of that. Now, when we think about, and I get this question often, how do we know how much sugar to consume, right? Of your added sugar. Or how do we know if we're getting in too much or if just how much we should be getting? So, according to the American Heart Association, women should limit their intake of added sugars to about 6 teaspoons a day, while men should stick to about 9 teaspoons. The recommendation for children is a lot less, or teens, it's a lot less. For 2-year-olds and under, no added sugar should be added. So again, 6 teaspoons a day for women and about 9 teaspoons for men. So when you look at the teaspoons, right, if you would need a visual, grab a teaspoon from your kitchen, right, and you can see it's a very small amount. It would be about like the third of your thumb. So not a lot of added sugar. And it's because we don't need added sugar, right? It's just that these recommendations are provided just as a guide, right? But we can live without any added sugar. We don't need it. We can get them with natural sources, right? Coming from our fruits, coming from our vegetables. If we add dairy or plant sources, we can get the sugar that we need from there, natural sugar. But added sugars, we don't need them. So this is just a guideline, right? A recommendation to help people stay healthy. So to put it in a perspective, right? 1 can of soda has around 10 teaspoons of sugar. So if you consume regular soda, right? A can of regular soda, you already consume pretty much the entire recommendation of that day in just that one soda. But oftentimes we just don't drink one soda, right? We add maybe another one, and then we add some other sugary foods, and maybe we cook, let's say, a pasta dish, and that pasta sauce has sugar. So these sugar can really add up quickly. So how can we be mindful, right? How can we have more practical tips in order to be aware of the sugar that we're consuming and to try to limit? So here are some tips. Number 1, you have to read the label, right? If you're like, oh, I never read the food labels, that's a waste of time, like what's the point? Here is the reason why, right? Because if you don't know what's in your food, right, how are you going to know what to change, right? How are you going to know how to modify things? You have to have the awareness, right? So number 1, you have to read your food label, but not only the food label. You also have to read the ingredients list, right? The new food label now has total sugars, and underneath is going to have added sugars. I've done a podcast on how to read a food label. So if you're wanting to learn how to do that, go back to that episode and take a look. But reading the food label is extremely important when you're buying more of these processed foods or more of these packaged foods, right? Because again, you might think that that specific product doesn't have any sugar, but it's not until you read the food label and ingredients list that you can really confirm that it doesn't have it. So it can be hidden again in sauces, dressings, bread, and many other things. Pastas. You even wonder, like, why does this have sugar? Like peanut butter, other nut butters, right? And again, it's because we have gotten so used to eating foods that have hidden sugars that we don't really realize, oh, that tastes like it has some kind of sugar, right? Because we have it in these foods. So reading your food label, sugar comes in so many forms, right? And so again, you might find it in glucose, sucrose, fructose, but you might also see it in like high fructose corn syrup, which you'll see it a lot often. So that's why it's important to read the ingredients list. And that is one of the ingredients that I recommend pretty much all my clients to try to stay away from, because it affects your liver significantly. And again, it increases your liver enzymes, right? But it can also contribute to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So keep that in mind. Read your food label. The other tip, right, is choosing whole foods. So when you think about whole foods, right, keeping them to their natural source as much as possible, right? So your fruits, your vegetables, your protein sources, your whole grains, right? If you do dairy, if you do plant-based milks, right, or alternatives, your nuts and your seeds, your avocados, right? You can create this really well-rounded, this really well-balanced meal, right, by just choosing those foods. And so you are going to, when you choose more of those foods, naturally you're going to know that there shouldn't be any added sugars, right? Because they're wholesome foods. Another tip here would be swapping your sugary drinks for water, carbonated water, or a non-sugary beverage, right? Because that is the easiest way to consume tons of sugar, right? When we drink something, and also the fastest way to increase your blood sugars. As you're drinking that sugary drink, your blood sugars are increasing. It's not a big deal when you don't have diabetes because your insulin, right, is going to kick in and is going to get that high amount of sugar into the cells. However, if there is enough sugar in the cells, either the muscle cells, the liver cells, then insulin is going to be like, okay, we have enough insulin where it needs to go. We have to create fat cells, right? Because we need to store this sugar somewhere. And if the muscle cells have enough, if the liver cells has enough sugar, we have to create fat cells, right, to store this sugar. So insulin, again, is not only a hormone that helps to regulate blood sugars, but it's also a hormone that creates fat cells. So keep that in mind as well. So swapping those sugary drinks and limiting sweets, right, as much as you can. It doesn't mean that, we can never have a dessert, right, or we can never have a sweet treat, but it's not something that we need to have every single day, right? At the moment, because maybe you're so used to having something sugary every single day, it's going to seem difficult. But slowly practicing that, hey, we don't have to have it every single day. We're going to miss it. We're going to crave it for a period of time, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But slowly, our bodies are going to be able to adjust. Our blood sugars are going to be managed and they're going to be at the level where they need to be. And we're going to be okay. The other thing too, right, which comes often, is that I can't seem to control my sugary cravings. Now, here is the thing. Oftentimes, it's not so much that we're out of control in terms of the sugar cravings. It's because there's an underlying reason as to why we have the sugary cravings. So understanding the underlying reason is going to help us to create a plan, right, to be able to fight those cravings, or not even fight, right, to be able to manage them, to be able to transform them in a way. So you have to be mindful, right, of your body. You have to be mindful of the things that trigger you, the things, events or things that happen that make you want to, choose that sugary treat. And then, right, be aware of it and like, what are you going to do about it? So, for example, when and this happens often, I see that, that trend, like when my clients are stressed, they want to eat something sugary. So it's not so much because they are actually hungry for the thing, but it's because the action of eating that it's helping them to feel relaxed. It's helping them to feel more like, I feel better. So it's not so much that the sugary food, right, is, I'm trying to think of the word, but like essentially we're using food, and it doesn't have to be a sugary treat. It could be any food. We're using food to cope, right? So once we know that, then we can be like, okay, yes, you're going to have the sugary cravings when you have these strong emotions, But what we want to do is, number one, acknowledge that, right? Okay, I'm really stressed, and that is why I want to have this sugary treat. So what I need to do is take a moment for myself, right? Take a moment to take a few deep breaths, to go for a walk, to write something, to listen to something. And when I come back, if I feel that I still want to have it, then I'm going to have it. But now my brain is not thinking like, okay, every time you're stressed, you need to choose that chocolate that you always choose. Right now it's because we actually want it, right? So it takes a lot of practicing. It's not going to happen right away. It's not going to even happen when you're in that emotional stage, because that critical thinking part of the brain almost goes out the window. So you have to practice these things on a daily basis to be able to make those choices, and for your body and brain to almost subconsciously do those things for you. So don't get settled, right, by feeling like this is out of control. Sometimes it's because there's an underlying reason for it, right? And it's not going to be easy, but you're aware of it. So now we can work on trying to figure out ways to help you manage that, help you transform that. So take a deep breath, my friend. There is hope there. We can also make our own healthier versions of sweets, right? At first, it might seem like, okay, this is not what I want to eat, right? But if it's like the flavors together and maybe less sugar, or you're also using substitutions for just added sugar, it's worth giving it a try. So how about artificial sweeteners? And I think I need to do an episode in just artificial sweeteners, so I'm not going to spend so much time on that specifically. I'll probably do that episode next week. But some people turn to artificial sweeteners, right, to avoid the added sugar. And so the question is that a healthier alternative? And it depends, right? In the sense of like that it is not going to increase your blood sugars, it is potentially true. And if that is one of the ways to help you manage, right, your sugar intake, that is a great step, right? But we have to also keep in mind that there is some research right out there that has been released that talks about how aspartame and sucrose could affect our gut health and even our appetite. So if you're looking into more of that research, let me know. I can link it in the show notes, or I can send it to you. But again, if it's to help you, right, as a first step to help you manage and control those sugary cravings, it's a great step, right? Then we can work on adding more natural sources, because when you think about, and this is all, this is all I am going to say about the artificial sweeteners for now. There are oftentimes 4 times or higher sweeter than actual sugar. And so, yes, we might not be using a lot, in comparison to regular sugar, or it might not be increasing our blood sugars per se, but the intensity, right, of how sweeter it is, it can affect our taste buds, right? So we're not really giving our bodies, our taste buds, a break of how sweet something, we consume, or when we like something super sweet, because we're still doing that, right? By adding these artificial sweeteners often, we're still, in a way, expecting, right, to taste things sweeter. So we have to train our bodies, we have to train our taste buds, right, to be okay, but not having super sugary foods. And the same goes with super salty foods, or foods that are higher in fat, right? It coats our tongue, and that's what makes them, in terms of fat, right? That's what makes those foods more palatable, more desirable, right? But yeah, I'll do that episode next week on artificial sweeteners. Okay, so we talked about different things, right? We talked about what sugar is, the two essentially different categories of sugar: added sugar and natural sugar, the role of insulin, right, when it comes to turning food or when it comes to managing our blood sugars and creating fat cells. We talked about reading the food label, right, choosing more of your wholesome foods, trying to reduce the amount of sugar that we consume just in general, right? So what are the takeaways here? Sugar itself isn't the evil, right? An evil ingredient. But too much of it, right, just like anything else, of added sugar specifically, can have serious consequences for our health. So the key here is to be mindful of where our sugar is coming from, where it's found, where we think that maybe it's not there, right? Which that's where the label reading comes in. And in trying to lower the amount, right, to a level where we feel that we don't need to add those added sugars. Okay, my friend. So if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with a friend, and leave a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. So specifically on how you manage your sugar in your diet or your sugary cravings. Let me know on my Instagram page at nutrition. What is it called? Yeah, nutrition _with_ Leonila. Or you can send me a message, when you go to the podcast. I want to say Apple Podcast. It says send us a text, so send me a text there too. But that is it for today, my friend. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep fueling your life with the best nutrition. All right. Until then, bye-bye for now. This podcast, the links and resources provided are for the purpose to educate only and are not a replacement for medical advice or nutrition therapy. I suggest you seek out the help of a trained professional to help you with your specific situation and needs.